Welcome to Criminals Profile.
Number 1. Melissa Lucio. Lucio was the first Latina woman sentenced to death in the state of Texas. Her case has been debated for more than a decade, not just because of what happened, but because of everything that might have gone wrong along the way. She was born in Lubbock, Texas in 1969, and by 2007 she was a mother of 12, pregnant with twins. On February 17th of that year, paramedics were called to her home in Harlingen. Her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah Alvarez, was unresponsive. Lucio told them Mariah had fallen down the stairs 2 days earlier, but when doctors examined the little girl, the story didn't add up. Because Mariah's body showed signs of severe trauma, bruises in different stages of healing, a broken arm, internal bleeding. This made the medical examiner ruled it a homicide, and Melissa Lucio was arrested that same night. Over 7 hours of interrogation, with no attorney present. Under pressure, exhausted, and grieving, Melissa eventually said things that prosecutors used as a confession. There was no video of her hurting Mariah, no eyewitnesses. But in August 2008, a jury found her guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to death. That could have been the end of it, but over the years, new voices started speaking up. Forensic experts, legal scholars, even some of the original jurors began to question whether the justice system got it right. They said the signs on Mariah's body could have been caused by the fall Lucio described, that the medical evidence wasn't as clear as the prosecution made it seem. And most of all, they argued her confession was not a confession at all, but the result of intense psychological pressure. The public took notice. Documentaries were made. Celebrities, lawmakers, and even members of the Texas House of Representatives called for a new look at the case. In April 2022, just days before her scheduled execution, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted a stay. The court agreed that new evidence should be reviewed. In 2024, a judge reviewed that evidence and agreed. He recommended overturning Melissa Lucio's conviction, saying key facts were suppressed during her original trial. As of now, May 2025, she remains on death row while the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals decides her fate. Melissa has always maintained her innocence, and her story, whether one of injustice or accountability, remains one of the most complicated, emotional, and scrutinized death row cases Texas has ever seen. Number 2. Taylor Renee Parker. She was just 27 years old when she carried out one of the most haunting crimes East Texas has ever seen. Parker was someone people followed on social media. She always smiled in photos, laughed at baby showers, and documented a pregnancy that never existed. Because the truth was, there was no pregnancy. For nearly a year, Taylor convinced her boyfriend, her family, and everyone around her that she was expecting. She wore a fake belly, posted fake ultrasound images, she planned a gender reveal, and everything was all part of a lie that kept growing. By October 2020, time had run out. She had no baby, no hospital plan, no backup story, and she was out of options, so she made a new plan. One that would give her a baby, by taking someone else's. On the morning of October 9th, Taylor carried out her long-prepared plans. She drove to the home of Reagan Simmons Hancock, a young mother who had no reason to be afraid of her. Reagan was 21, 8 months pregnant. She had a husband, a little girl, and another daughter on the way. She opened her front door, expecting a visit from someone she knew. She never expected that it would be the last thing she'd do. What happened inside that home was brutal. Taylor attacked Reagan with overwhelming force. Investigators said there were more than 100 stab wounds. She beat her, stabbed her, and then, while Reagan was still alive, cut her open to remove the baby. She left Reagan there to die, took the newborn, and drove away. About an hour later, near Idabel, Oklahoma, she was pulled over for speeding. When the trooper approached, he found Taylor with the baby in her lap. She told him she had just given birth on the side of the road. The umbilical cord was still attached, so there is no reason why the trooper could doubt her words. At the hospital, it didn't take long to see the truth, because Taylor showed no signs of childbirth, no physical trauma, no labour. Doctors knew something wasn't right, and soon enough, everything came to light. She hadn't given birth. She had stolen the baby, and by then it was too late. The child, Braxlyn Sage Hancock, didn't survive. Taylor Parker was arrested the same day. In September 2022, her trial began. Over 25 days, more than 140 witnesses took the stand. Prosecutors laid out how Taylor had spent months preparing, studying labour, mimicking symptoms, even watching videos on how to perform a home caesarean. This wasn't desperation in the moment, it was a calculated, step-by-step plan. In November, the jury found her guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to death. Today, Taylor Parker remains on death row in the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, one of only a handful of women in Texas waiting for execution. Number 3. Darlie Routier. In the early hours of June 6, 1996, a chilling 911 call came from a suburban home in Rowlett, Texas. On the line was 26-year-old Darlie Routier. She was frantic, telling the dispatcher that someone had broken into her home and stabbed her 2 sons, 6-year-old Devon and 5-year-old Damon. Police arrived within minutes. The scene they found was horrifying. Both boys had been brutally stabbed. Damon was still alive, struggling to survive when officers got there, but unfortunately, he died before paramedics could save him. Devon had already succumbed to his wounds. Darlie had injuries too, a deep cut across her neck and wounds on her arms. She told investigators she'd fought off an intruder, someone who had escaped through the garage. At the moment of the crime, her husband Darren and their youngest son Drake were upstairs, unharmed. But the story began to fall apart. Detectives searched the home and found inconsistencies. The window the intruder allegedly came through had undisturbed dust on the sill. No footprints in the mulch outside. No blood trail leading away from the home. But there was something else. A bloody sock, discovered 75 yards away, stained with both boys' blood. The timeline didn't make sense at all. If Darlie had committed the crime, when could she have planted it? Still, suspicion turned toward her. Investigators claimed Darlie's wounds were self-inflicted. They said the crime scene was staged, and during the trial, prosecutors played a video of Darlie at Devon's grave, spraying silly string and smiling during what was supposed to be a memorial. They told the jury it showed a lack of remorse. And Darlie claimed it was filmed after a more somber ceremony, one the jury never saw. In January 1997, her trial began in Kerrville, Texas. Prosecutors charged her only with Damon's murder, focusing their efforts on securing a single conviction. On February 1st, the jury found Darlie guilty. 3 days later, she was sentenced to death. But from the start, Darlie has insisted she's innocent. Her supporters argue the investigation was flawed. They point to the bloody sock as evidence of a second party. They question the way forensic evidence was handled, and they continue to fight for a new trial. In 2008, Darlie was granted the right to new DNA testing. As of 2024, those tests have been completed, but they haven't yet led to a new trial. Today, Darlie Routier remains on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville. She has never been tried for Devon's murder. Whether she's a grieving mother wrongfully accused, or the architect of a crime that stunned a community, her case continues to raise questions almost 30 years later. Number 4. Linda Carty. Linda Carty was born on October 5, 1958, in St. Kitts, a British colony at the time, which granted her UK citizenship. She later moved to the United States, became a US citizen, and worked as a school teacher. At one point, she also served as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Administration. But by 2001, her life took a turn that placed her at the center of one of Texas's most controversial death penalty cases. It was May 16, 2001. A 25-year-old woman named Joanna Rodriguez and her newborn son were kidnapped from their apartment in Houston, Texas. The child was just 3 days old. Police launched an immediate search. Within 24 hours, Joanna's body was found in the trunk of a car. She had been suffocated, plastic bag over her head, duct tape sealing it shut, and her baby was found alive in a different vehicle. The evidence quickly led to Linda Carty. Her fingerprints were found on one of the cars. Witnesses and co-defendants told investigators that Linda had orchestrated the abduction, hoping to claim the child as her own. Prosecutors said she told friends she was expecting a baby, despite not being pregnant. Carty didn't act alone. She hired 3 men to carry out the kidnapping, but all of them pointed back to her, saying she planned the whole thing. In February 2002, Linda was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Linda has always maintained her innocence. She says her co-defendants framed her out of revenge because of her past work with the DEA. She claims the prosecution mishandled the case, that her attorney failed to present key evidence, and that her rights as a British citizen were violated because the UK government wasn't informed of her arrest in time to provide consular help. Despite her appeals, every court, state, federal, and even the US Supreme Court, has upheld her conviction. Her case has drawn international attention. Human rights groups, members of the British government, and legal organisations have raised questions about the fairness of her trial, and yet the verdict stands. Today, Linda Carty remains on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. She's one of the few foreign nationals and one of the few women awaiting execution in the United States. Some says she's a grieving woman betrayed by a broken system, while others say she's a manipulator who planned a murder to steal another woman's child.
Number 5. Erica Sheppard. In the summer of 1993, Houston police responded to a brutal crime that left a 43-year-old woman dead inside her own home. Her name was Marilyn Sage Meeher. She had been strangled with a lamp cord during a robbery. Her body found just steps from her front door. 19-year-old Erica Yvonne Sheppard and her co-defendant, James Dickerson, were arrested shortly after. The two had forced their way into Marilyn's home, with the intent to steal her car. What unfolded instead was a violent and fatal encounter. In March 1995, Erica was convicted of capital murder. The state of Texas sentenced her to death at the age of 21 years. But her case didn't end there. From the beginning, there were questions. Not about whether a crime had occurred, but about who Erica was before that day, and whether the jury ever truly saw the full picture. Erica Sheppard had lived through years of physical and sexual abuse. From childhood into her teens, she suffered trauma that left deep psychological scars. By the time of her arrest, medical experts say she showed signs of PTSD and had the cognitive development of a 14-year-old. None of that was presented to the jury. Her defense attorney failed to investigate her background fully. No expert testimony. No psychological evaluations. No context. The prosecution, on the other hand, painted her as a cold, calculating killer. In court, she was called a predator and a jackal. There was no mention of the abuse, no discussion of her mental health, just the facts of the crime, and a demand for the harshest punishment available. And that's what she received. Since then, Erica's case has been the subject of national and international attention. Advocacy groups, legal scholars, and mental health professionals have questioned whether her trial met even the minimum standards of fairness. In 2020, the US Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit upheld her sentence, but not without dissent. One judge openly questioned whether the jury would have made the same decision had they been told about Erica's background, brain damage, and cognitive limitations. As of 2025, Erica Sheppard remains on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. Number 6. Brittany Holberg. On November 13th, 1996, Amarillo, Texas, inside a modest home, police discovered a scene so violent, it shocked even seasoned officers. 80-year-old A.B. Towery Sr. had been beaten, stabbed, and left for dead. He'd suffered 58 stab wounds. He'd been hit with a hammer. A lamp pole had been shoved down his throat. Investigators quickly identified a suspect, 23-year-old Brittany Holberg. She'd been living a chaotic life, struggling with addiction, drifting through unstable housing, and, according to her own words, working as a sex worker to survive. Holberg claimed she met Towery that day. She said he offered her money. And according to her, what followed was an act of self-defense. She said Towery turned violent when he discovered she was using drugs. But prosecutors told a different story. They said it was premeditated, that she intended to rob him. In 1997, after being featured on America's Most Wanted, Brittany was arrested in Memphis, Tennessee. Her trial began in 1998, and one of the key witnesses was Vicky Kirkpatrick, a jailhouse informant who testified that Holberg had confessed to the murder. The jury found her guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to death. That sentence stood for more than 25 years. But in 2011, everything began to shift. Kirkpatrick recanted her testimony, admitting she had been pressured and compensated by the prosecution. Details that were never shared with the defense. Holberg's legal team filed a new appeal, arguing that her constitutional rights had been violated. And in March 2025, the US Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit agreed. They ruled that Brittany's trial had been compromised, that the prosecution's failure to disclose Kirkpatrick's role as a paid informant violated her right to a fair trial. Her conviction was overturned, the case sent back for further proceedings. As of now, Brittany Holberg remains incarcerated at the Patrick L. O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, no longer under a death sentence, but still awaiting what comes next. Nearly 30 years later, the facts of what happened in that house remain disturbing. But the search for justice? It's still unfolding.
Number 7. Kimberly Diane Cargill. On June 18th, 2010, Kimberly Cargill drove 39-year-old Cherry Walker out of town. Not to visit a friend, not to drop her off, but to make sure Cherry never made it to court. Cherry had developmental disabilities. She was kind, gentle, and she babysat Kimberly's son. But now, she had been called to testify in a child custody hearing, one that could cost Kimberly her parental rights, one she was desperate to avoid. So Kimberly invited Cherry out for dinner. Somewhere in Smith County, after a long ride when no one's seen what's coming, Cargill strangled Cherry to death. Then she took her body to a remote road, doused her in lighter fluid, and set her on fire. By the time first responders arrived, there was little left to identify, but they found just enough, and soon, the truth came out. When Kimberly was questioned, she claimed Cherry had died from a seizure in her car. She said she panicked, that she didn't know what to do, but investigators didn't buy it. Too many signs pointed to something far more intentional. In May 2012, Kimberly Cargill was convicted of capital murder. Prosecutors argued that she had silenced a key witness to protect herself, that Cherry's death was not a panic reaction, but a premeditated decision. The jury agreed, and Cargill was sentenced to death. Years later, in 2023, her attorneys brought new claims forward, suggesting that Cherry may have died from SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, that it wasn't murder at all. But even with medical experts supporting the theory, the courts remained unmoved. As of 2025, Kimberly Cargill is still on death row, housed at the O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas. Her legal team continues to fight. But for now, the sentence stands.